responses, why that is becoming so important. And I have found that these are the four main reasons why that is. One is leadership indeed is different around the world. More and more people work in multicultural teams. We have much more access to different resources all over the world. And the first one is our customer base is becoming more international. Yeah? So therefore this first one, the focus on the customer, or as the French would say, the focus on the customer, is... By the way, this is not a joke. This is not a joke.
It is a joke.
This is a story, a well-known story in not only in academic circles, but also in financial analyst circles, because this is, I think it's 20 years ago or so, that Péchinet, a French company, went on the New York Stock Exchange. And they were very diversified. Now they're part of Alcon and they're very much into steel and aluminium back. But at a certain moment in their life cycle, they were very diversified. So these New York analysts, they said, what is your core business? And there's this very famous speech of the PDG, the CEO of Péchinet, for this international audience of analysts in New York. I come from the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium, but I can't do the accent that well. But it went something like, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your feedback. There's only one message for Péchinet, and the message is to fuck us, fuck us, fuck us. And I spoke at a conference a couple of weeks ago where there was somebody from Péchinet who had used to work at Péchinet and said, yeah, this is a well-known story. It's indeed. Our customers are becoming global, and therefore we think that we might use exactly the same approaches as we use in our part of the world, and we underestimate that it doesn't mean the same thing. And these are some, I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I mean, the car is the most well-known example. It's the Chevrolet Nova that was not a success in Mexico. And Chevrolet, General Motors, was quite intrigued, why is that? And then they found out that Nova, and many Spanish-speaking people, yeah, means doesn't go.
Then you have the Paquero, he's a wanker.
A marketing expert to realize if you call a car doesn't go, yeah. There's a more recent example, and I'm sure you're going to help me. The Mitsubishi.
Paquero.
Okay, you know it, so you can say in the mic what it means, so I don't get sued. Yeah. So Mitsubishi Paquero. In the Spanish-speaking countries, it's called the Mitsubishi Montero because Paquero in Spanish-speaking countries means something else.
Yes, something else.
It means wanker.
It's always the same when you have Spanish people. They're so the best explanation a Spanish person once gave for a group like you is he said it's when a man makes love to himself. Yeah? to avoid that problem, they call it a Montero. So, and okay, I know that there are quite a lot of American companies here, and also a couple of Swedish Electrolux, which is very well, it's one a client I do a lot of work with. And where are the people from the UK? Yeah, you probably all remember a couple of years ago, this is also many years ago, they launched a vacuum cleaner. They translated the sentence of the Swedish tagline into English, and it sounded okay, but they didn't realize it might not sound okay in the UK. And therefore everybody in the UK remembers this campaign because it said, nothing sucks like Electrolux. The thing is that, and I think more and more companies are adopting to the local habits because, for instance, McDonald's has learned it the hard way. Yeah, McDonald's has learned the hard way that if you go into India, a beef burger is not going to be a success. Yeah. Now we can laugh with this, but when I teach this more extensively on MBA programs, I have the startup pictures of a McDonald's, and indeed it was hamburgers like everywhere else. So not thinking through. So they're adapting now more and more. Also, when they went to Asia, they had this guy Ronald, and they said, we know that Asian people have difficulty pronouncing the R, so we'll call him Donald McDonald, yeah? What they forgot was that in certain parts of Asia, a white face is a symbol of death, yeah? Now you don't have to have an MBA in marketing to realize if you put a symbol of death outside of your restaurant, it's not the most appetizing thing to get people in there. So,
that reminds me of the Salmon Ella restaurant.
Is Disney when they came to Europe. And the reason why I love it is because, not only in this audience, but it is because, yeah, they made all the mistakes that they could make. I mean, has anybody been in Disneyland or Disney World in the United States? Yeah? Sure. Most people. So they took this concept and they came to France. And they said, okay, it works in America. It also, which didn't help them to adapt, because they went first to Japan, in Tokyo, and there this American model worked. So they said we can do exactly the same in France. You're probably all too young to remember some of the mistakes that they made. But for instance, what they found was American people, on what do they spend a lot of money in theme parks? Food, yeah? Food. So food is a big revenue in a theme park. Now, European people, they don't do that. A lot of European people take their food into the theme park. The best practice in that, of course, are the Dutch, who take their food everywhere when they go on holiday. But caravan full with 2 weeks of food. But on what else do people in theme parks spend a lot of money in the United States?
Alcohol.
Gadgets, yeah, merchandising. So that's another big chunk of the revenue that they didn't get. And it didn't help when the American who was running Euro Disney, as it was called at that moment, said in a French newspaper, people don't buy as much gadgets as we do in the United States because people in Europe don't love their children as much as we do. In that same article, he said, people will come to Euro Disney and do Paris as a side attraction. Now, calling Paris a side attraction in a French newspaper is not the most sensitive thing to do. So from a business point of view, that made a big chunk of revenue lost by not understanding the culture. The other thing was the service concept. Yeah? I know we have a couple of American people here, but when you go into any theme park, or actually in any shop in the United States, what does everybody who you meet say who works there? Hello? How are you doing? Have you ever asked a Frenchman or a French person to smile at somebody he doesn't know, let alone talk to them? Yeah? When I teach this case, I have this video of these American traders coming in and saying, so you meet somebody in the park, you have all these French people ready to go walk in the park, you meet somebody and you smile and you say, how are you doing? You see these French people look, smile at people we don't know, yeah? Talk with them about what? So the thing is that some of these, and these are all, I mean, all these companies are successful. So why do you think, let's try to get, you just shout it out if I hear it, I'll just, because otherwise somebody has to run around like in Jerry Springer with the mic from table to table. But why is it that these companies make these mistakes? Why is that? Because these are not unsuccessful companies. Why do they make these mistakes?
Not listening to advice.
Very often they don't investigate the culture, and that could be sometimes just pure ignorance. That could also be sometimes pure arrogance and thinking we don't need to investigate the culture and we can go in different parts of the world. Or sometimes it's just thinking our model only works if we do it exactly like we do it at home. So that is one where a lot of misunderstandings have come from. We also said that you have now much more access to global resources. And you were talking about this also just when you were talking, when we had the music analogy, that sometimes you work together in a multicultural team. And that is what you see more and more. This is another example of ST Microelectronics putting together this storage controller and using different parts of the world for their strength. And of course, then you have international teams. Now, who in this room is part of an international team? Okay. So what would you say are some of the advantages of being part of an international team? What are some of the advantages? Just shout them out.
I understand the local culture.
Yeah, if some of these companies would have had in their development team some local people, perhaps some of these mistakes were not made. Yeah? What else are the advantages? Yeah, diversity of thought, yeah, and therefore more creativity. Somebody?
Strength. Shows strength.
Yeah, you show strength, and it's interesting that all the strengths and all the good things, and very often that they are there, but there are also a lot of problems, and a lot of them have to do with culture. But I'm always intrigued to find out that a lot of people, management boards, they call people like me and they say, Jean, we have a problem. We don't understand our markets, and we don't understand actually each other's cultures, where we go in different parts, and we don't challenge each other. And I very often take a picture of these management boards, and that is how they look. Yeah. In other audiences, people laugh more with this than here, but the thing is that now I didn't have to do a lot, yeah, to find this. You just Google management board, you ask for pictures, and 80 to 90% look like this. Yeah? Sometimes there's one or two ladies in there, and in which roles do these ladies tend to be? HR, yeah? Legal, yeah, and legal or communication. The pink ghetto, as they call it in the United States, I found out. The thing is that, why is it that you find this? Is because that's much more easier, yeah? Imagine that these people would recruit to impacts like this. Yeah? So this is of course easier because there's much more that you have in common. Yeah? And therefore, at first glance, it's easier because what do you see here? A lot of conformity. And as I said, you see it a lot. Yeah? And I don't say it's good, I don't say it's bad, because it is. But that is probably why these people don't necessarily understand their customers. One of the customers that I mentioned before, Electrolux, yeah, till a year ago. Now Electrolux, microwaves, washing machines, vacuum cleaners. Who, not for us in the room because we are all men in touch with our feminine side, but who traditionally uses these products most? Housewives. How many women were there in the management board of Electrolux? And there was one in legal, yeah? Till a year ago. So it's, and how many non-Swedes were there in the management board of Electrolux being a worldwide player? Also only one till a year ago. So it's not a good presentation, yeah? And I saw this even stronger when I was working in Sri Lanka with a company called MAS Holdings. And MAS Holdings, it's a family-owned company, and what do? They make lingerie for Victoria's Secrets, yeah? And I did a workshop with the top 40 of that company. Now, who wears lingerie most?
That's most time. They go to
Yeah.
sleep in it.
Yeah, that's good. You want to talk about it? I studied 5 years of psychology, so, but anyway, the thing is that, sorry, the thing is that what, it was, you would say women, but it was of these 40, there were only 2 women that were in product management roles. And it was interesting that, of course, I challenged them with this. I said, listen, you have a very feminine product that you produce, yet you're all men. Now, what do you think they told me as their reason why that was?
Men are the end users.
Sorry? Yeah, man knows what they want, and they also did this research. Men buy a lot of lingerie for their significant others, as they call it in the United States, but men spend much more money on lingerie than ladies do, yeah? I see some of the ladies look at me like then we are with the wrong man. on average, everywhere in the world. So that was their reason. But the thing is that so different, then it's hard to find a commonality. Now, it's a well-known fact that international teams were best not when you try to find too much commonality, because then why do you have an international team? And not when you have too much of this extreme difference, but when you have one thing that you have in common. If you think back of the presenter before with music, when he talked about what we share, we come from different backgrounds, but what we share is this one thing that we have in common, this music. Yeah? It's like going to a Harley Davidson gathering. Has anybody been to, or has anybody has a Harley Davidson? Yeah? If you go to a Harley Davidson gathering, you find a big diversity of people. Yeah? But why do they get along very well? They all love a Harley Davidson, and therefore a CEO and a blue-collar worker can be there together having fun because they focus at that moment on the one thing that they have in common, which is the love for the Harley Davidson. Yeah? Now, the other reason why it's important, leadership doesn't mean the same thing in different parts of the world. And this is a question which has been asked a lot of times, and I see that with putting it on different, it has gone a little bit astray, but it doesn't matter because the message is there. What they ask in different cultures is, it's important for a manager to have at hand precise answer to most of the questions that the subordinate might raise about their work. Yeah. Now, if you look at, these are the countries who agree with this, so they find it's important that the manager has the right answer. But go on that side, it's not so important. Now, this has an important consequence. This has a couple of consequences, because if I am, yesterday I was working with an international group, and there was a Dutch person responsible for France. Yeah? And it was very frustrating for the French people, because the French said, we go and ask him a question, and he only says, what do you think yourself about it? Yeah? And the opposite, the Dutch person says, you know, in Holland when I have an idea, there are at least 20 people to challenge me. Here, because I'm the boss, everybody does this. Yeah? And I think it's an important one that a lot of things that are developed on leadership are developed in these parts of the world, and therefore not necessarily work on these parts over there. Because what a manager does, or what you get promoted for on this side, is quite different from that side. Yeah? Here it's about technical competence. On that side it's about how much do you know and how much can you work across. Yeah? And of course, plenty of examples in mergers and acquisitions. Yeah? The best one that I know, because as I said, I work already for many years with that company, Electrolux, Swedish. Does anybody work with Swedes? Yeah? Or yeah?
I've worked with Sweden.
Do you have Sweden? Yeah? You work?
Yeah.
Okay. The management style of Sweden, how would you describe that?
Micromanagement.
Well, it's very stiff and just like, you know, they take very precise decisions and...
They take decisions, precise decisions, but they include quite a lot of people before they take the decision. Yeah?
As long as it's
So
Swedish.
it's all about consensus, the typical Swedish company. They acquired a family-owned Italian company. Zanussi. Now, who takes the decision in that family-owned Italian company? Papa Zanussi and Mama Zanussi. But anyway, when there are Italian people in the room, they always say, don't talk about my mother. But so, and here you have one of these things that actually didn't work, because these Swedish people, they were asking these Italians, give us input. And these Italians said, give you input, you are our bosses, tell us what we have to do. Yeah? And it was quite frustrating. So Electrolux, they found in the headquarters the solution for this, a matrix structure. Yeah? A matrix structure. The orgasm of people at headquarters, a matrix structure. Now, matrix structures are anywhere very difficult to make work, but certainly in these cultures, it is even more difficult. Yeah? Because the consequence of this is also that you have loyalty towards your boss. So when we did interviews with Italian people working in this matrix structure, they told us, Jean, you can't have two papas. Yeah? You can't have two people that you report to. Yeah? And just an example to say that leadership has a completely different meaning around different parts of the world. Yeah? So when you lead people who come from a different part, you might have a couple of challenges. Now, all these examples, they illustrate, I think, this saying of a French philosopher with probably Belgian roots, but that's a joke actually. Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with Belgian people. If we tell a joke, we have to say it's a joke and nobody laughs. The thing is that he said there are truths on this side of the Pyrenees which are falsehoods on the other. Yeah. And I think that if there's one thing that you can, we all know this, yeah? But I think if you look at some of the examples I gave, it's like we have continuously to remind ourselves that this is the case. Yeah? And certainly also it's not because it works at our side and it works on the other side. A good example is this one, the American way. Where are my American friends here? Okay. So that was the last time you're going to be called, probably you're going to call me a friend. But anyway, the Americans and the Japanese decided to engage in a competitive boat race, and both teams practiced hard and long to reach their peak performance. And on the big day, their boats felt ready, and the Japanese won by a mile. Afterwards, the American team was very discouraged by the loss. Morale went down. Corporate management decided that the reason for this defeat had to be found. The consultant was hired, and his findings were the Japanese team has 8 people rowing and 1 person steering. The American team has 1 person rowing and 8 people steering. After a year of study and millions spent analyzing the problem, the consulting firm concluded that too many people were steering and not enough were rowing on the American team. So the next year, as the race day neared again, the American team's management structure was reorganized, and you had 4 steering managers, 3 area steering manager, 1 staff steering manager, and a new performance review system for the person rowing the boat to provide work incentive. Next year, the Japanese won by 2 miles. And humiliated, the American corporation laid off the rower for poor performance, and the So, just to say that the one way is not necessarily the only way. Now, what is culture actually? If you think about it, what is culture? What is culture? I know that some of you are eager for knowledge, so I'll give you a theoretical definition, although you could fill the whole room with definitions of culture. But one is the collective mental programming of a group of people. Yeah. Now, what's your name? Chuck, you look like a reasonable person to me at first glance. When you are on holiday with your significant other, do you then say on the second day, oh darling, what an interesting collective mental programming of a group of people they have here?
Almost always.
Always. Okay, I chose the wrong person. But the thing is that it's not exactly what we say or what we see. And I think that's where it comes from, and that is indeed culture, is this thing that, by the way, when are you becoming aware of your culture is when you're outside of it, yeah? I mean, I didn't know that Belgium had a culture. I know that some of you still would argue this, but that Belgium had a culture. Before I came and lived here in London, I lived here for 6 years, now I moved back to Belgium. That was my choice, I was not sent back. But the thing is that I remember the first time here in London, I wanted to get on a bus. So I said, let's do it the Belgian way. And how do you get on a bus in Belgium is by pushing people aside. Yeah. I found out that's not a thing to do here in London because they queued for a mile. And I said, oh my God, this is typical Belgium. So that is when I became aware of my culture. And of course, this all comes from this collective mental programming of a group of people. But the things that we see are the ones that we focus on. We see things. And they come from norms and value and basic assumptions. But when we are on holiday, what do we notice first? The similarities or the differences? The differences, yeah. I've never been asked to do sessions on cross-cultural similarities. So we notice the difference. Yeah? And the other thing that we do is we see the same thing, and very often we think it means the same thing. Yeah? Because we don't necessarily go deeper to understand it. And of course I could just fill the next 2 hours with examples of body language. Yeah? The best known is this movement. Yeah? In the United States, what does this mean? Okay. Next time you're in Brazil, try it. We have our specialist here who can tell you what it means, but trust me, it doesn't mean okay. Yeah? It means something that we've talked about before. Yeah. So the thing is that, yeah, and I've seen a lot of American people be very impressed when Brazilians go like that to them. But I've also seen the opposite. I've seen Brazilian people very upset by Americans going like that to them while they want to give them a compliment. So it's not because you see the same things that it means the same thing. And that's actually when, I know there's a very good book of a New York Times journalist, Thomas Friedman, The World is Flat. And I partly agree with that, but I think you have to be careful. It's not because you see the same things that therefore it is all the same. I mean, international business people like all of us, we stay in hotels where we can watch CNN, Desperate Housewives, I mean the series, Sky News, yeah. We see everywhere the same. We can have a Starbucks. A month ago, Starbucks opened their first Starbucks in Belgium. So you can have a Starbucks now everywhere. Even in a Starbucks, you can have a Starbucks. But the thing is that it doesn't mean that therefore... I mean, I was doing a workshop not like this, but in India. And I was staying in a hotel, and indeed, that hotel could have been anywhere. And if I then have the illusion, oh, it's all the same here, when I want to do business with people from India, I might get it wrong. So the world is flat. Yes, you see the same things, but don't take for granted that they mean the same things. Yeah? And therefore, when you see actually differences, what do you tend to do with these differences? What do you tend to do?
Make fun of.
Make fun, yeah? Make fun. And why do we make fun? Why do we make fun of different cultures? I do it also, yeah? But I think it's because we tend to generalize, yeah? We all, the thing that we do, apart from making fun and also judging, yeah? They do it like this here, yeah? The other thing is that we also stereotype. And I do it also, but I never forget that I'm stereotyping. And what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. One of the dimensions in which cultures differ, I did a lot of work on this with this guy called Strompenaars. Excellent. He's Dutch, but it's excellent. Yeah, it hurts a little bit for a Belgian to say Dutch and excellent in one sentence, but Fons's father is Dutch and his mother is French, so it's actually a Belgian, if you think about it. And one dimension which he found in which cultures differ is the dimension of, can you show emotions at work, yes or no? Yeah? And he calls the ones where you can't show emotions at work the neutral cultures, and where you can show emotions at work the affective. Now, can you think of countries who fall more on the neutral side, where you're not supposed to show a lot of emotion at work? Germany, yeah. Japan, Austria, UK. I've been working here 13 years in Ashridge. Okay, it's the southeast of England. I've been working here 13 years, and the highest level of emotion I've seen was with my colleagues, quite upset. Quite upset was the highest level of emotion. I used to have an English boss, and I would go to him with an idea, and he would say to me, not bad, interesting. And I thought, it's interesting, and I did it, but then he was rather annoyed. And he suggested, yeah? So I don't say that English people don't have emotions. We've seen that a couple of 10 years ago when a lady died. But the thing is that you don't show them that often. Now, can you think of cultures on the other side where it's much more acceptable to use emotions or to show emotions? Italy, yeah, Spain, a lot of the Mediterranean countries. But I saw that once on holiday, and although it's on holiday, it's a good reflection because I've seen it a million times in international groups and in international teams. I went on holiday with 50 Italians, 10 Brits and 1 German. Yeah? Okay, I have strange ideas on holidays, but anyway. I wanted to learn to scuba dive, so you go on this resort, you do everything together. We're sitting at lunch in a little bit the same setting as here, and you, of course in open air, and you could see a school of dolphins. Yeah? These Italians, they see these dolphins, they stand up, Delfine, Delfine, yeah? Now what do you think that the English did after having complained that they didn't have a kettle to make tea in their bungalow, because that's what you expect in the middle of the Indian Ocean because they used to own it. The thing is that what do you think? What do you think that the English did? Yeah, they said, "Oh my God, there are some dolphins." Sometimes people ask you, what did the German do? The German took his clipboard and started to count the number of dolphins. Okay, this is what happened on holiday, and therefore you can say it doesn't matter. But what do you think the English said about the Italians and the Italians said about the English? The English said, literally actually they said, because they were rather stereotypical English, they said they don't know how to behave at lunch. And the Italians said, che cazzo, and we have our specialist who will translate that during the break. And they are so boring. And they immediately started to judge each other, yeah? Because when you are confronted with these differences, it creates mistrust, yeah? It creates mistrust. It happened to me. I was 2 weeks in Ashridge, 2 of my female colleagues get promoted, and the first thing that Belgian people do when these 2 female colleagues get promoted and give a drink in the bar, what is the first thing that we do? We kiss them. Now I found out that is not a thing to do in the UK. Not that they slapped me in the face, they were well known for their good taste. But the thing is that the rest of the organization who was there looked at me, oh my God, what have we recruited? A mad Belgian psychologist who kisses our women. Yeah? And it gave me a reputation which now 13 years later I still have to live up to. But the thing is that it creates this mistrust. And therefore, I've seen a lot of international teams working together, but because they see these differences and they never talk about it, what happens is they start to judge. And what do they do in the evening? Like on that holiday example, they don't spend time together because it makes us feel uncomfortable. So let's stick with people and culture that we know, yeah, and don't see it as a learning opportunity. Yeah? So this stereotyping is something that's happened. And also, what I can do is, of course, I can help you to understand some of these differences. But the most important thing is that you respect them. Yeah? It's not, one is not better than the other. Can we learn from each other? Yeah? And it's not neither by adapting. Yeah? I'm not one of these people who says, when in Rome, do like the Romans do. Because I've seen that go wrong many times. Because I've seen English people go to Italy and trying to become like Italian. Hello, how are you doing? Are you okay? Yeah? This is the English version. This is the English version of going Italian. And although it's done with good intentions, it has the opposite effect, because what would the Italian think? He's making fun of me. Yeah? So it's not about adapting, because if you adapt too much, then it becomes unnatural. It's about respecting and trying to learn from each other when you have this one thing in common. And I think that is a tendency that is a little bit counter-natural, because it's not by coincidence that you have these pictures of all these men running companies who all are the same, because that's easier. Yeah? It's much more difficult working with people who are different, because it makes us feel uncomfortable, we tend to judge them, yeah? But you have to be careful that when you talk about cultures, like I've been doing now, and I do it on purpose, that we also have to be careful not only to think in stereotypes. I mean, I do it because it's good fun, and don't get me wrong, there is a truth in a stereotype, but it's just always the exaggerated form of this stereotype, yeah? And the other thing is, of course, when you stereotype, you have to know that the next person is perhaps not living up to the stereotype, yeah? I mean, there are English people who are emotional, yeah? I haven't met her, otherwise I would have married her. But it exists. Like the next Italian you're going to meet is perhaps less emotional than your stereotype. So it's having an open mind. It's also trying to find out what do we have in common. And I think what even complicates it more is that we are influenced by a lot of different cultures. Yeah? And I think that is a very important thing, because I can talk here about national cultures, but the same things apply to corporate cultures, to functional cultures, to team cultures, and then we have individual preferences. And I also know, and I'm sure you don't know that, but in a lot of companies where your friends work, I've also sometimes had people use cultural differences as an excuse. Yeah? Like, it's in my culture. Yeah? I was teaching an MBA in Switzerland last week, and there was a guy at 11 o'clock who went out and he never came back, and the day after he says to me, "Yeah, sorry Jean, I had a hangover and I went to bed. It's a thing about my culture." I said, "That has nothing to do with your culture. You just had a hangover, but it's not because you're Brazilian that then you go at 11 o'clock to bed." Yeah? So sometimes I've seen it also used as an excuse. Now, what important is, of course, is this awareness and this understanding. Yeah? And therefore, what people have done is try to come up with cultural frameworks to understand these differences. And neutral versus effective, the example I gave, is just one. Do you have energy for one more? Yeah, okay. Okay, you were quite excited there, actually. Okay. Now, because in the slides that you will get, there are 2 others more, but I will focus on one. And it has to do with, imagine, this is a good one actually, imagine, normally I ask to close the eyes, but that's high risk, I think now. Imagine your friend is driving a car at 60 miles an hour or 60 kilometers an hour. It's late at night. The place where he is driving, you're only allowed to drive 40 kilometers or 40 miles. But it's late at night, so he hits a pedestrian, and it comes to a court case. So he hits a pedestrian, and it comes to a court case, and the lawyer of your friend comes and sees you and says, "You are the only witness. You are the only one who knows that he was driving 60 miles when he was only allowed 40 miles. So if you just testify to the lower figure, it will be okay." Yeah? So my question to you is, who would not testify to the lower figure? Who would not testify to the lower figure? Okay. Would there anybody testify to the lower figure? So for all the others, it depends. Yeah? Which is always a good answer actually. It depends. Although global warming is also good as an answer. But in most of these presentations, if people ask you to say global warming, and you probably are right in 90% of the cases. But it depends. On what does it depend? On what does it depend? Sorry? Yeah. What is the relationship with the friend? Yeah? How good is the friend? What else might it depend on? What happened to the pedestrian? Yeah? Something, there's one, I did this once, there was a guy who says, "What happened to the car?" He was from Germany. I know it's a stereotypical picture, but yeah, there is some truth in it, yeah. Now, sometimes I say the pedestrian is dead, yeah? And for some people that is the ultimate thing not to testify. For others, it is the opposite, and they would say, then I would testify. But if you look at data, if you look at data, these are countries, answers who say, will not testify. Yeah? 97% of the Swiss people who have ever been asked this question say, I will not testify. It doesn't matter what happened, how good a friend he is. It doesn't matter how injured the pedestrian is. I will not testify. 97% of the Swiss. Has anybody been in Switzerland? Do you recognize this? Everybody is a policeman, yeah? If you park your car somewhere, yeah, in Switzerland where you're not allowed, you've probably been told off. USA, Canada, Sweden, Australia, UK, Holland, Germany, all these countries would say that the rules are more important than the relationships. These countries say it depends and the relationship is more important. Now this one is very important in business. Yeah? Because here people will say the rules are more important, so therefore we make contracts. Yeah? And you stick to the, that's why in the United States there are so many lawyers. Yeah? Because if you have so many rules, you also have to have a system in place to keep that going. Yeah? And in the other side, the relationship is more important. So it's not one or the other. Because these people who said, I will not testify, who fall much into this rule-oriented category, if it is your mother or your father, you probably start to think completely differently. Yeah? And then you become very relationship-oriented. So it's not a dichotomy, it is actually a circle. Yeah? Now this is important in business, because what do companies in these rule-oriented cultures normally do? What do people at headquarters in rule-oriented companies very often do? I know it's an eternal question, what do people in headquarters do, but the thing is that they make rules. And what they do is, they go around checking these rules. Yeah? And they come and see you once a year. Hi, I'm from headquarters and I'm here to help you. Which is one of the biggest lies in the world. But the thing is that, and what happens then in these cultures, where rules are not so important, is something that probably you don't know, but in the companies where your friends work, it happens all the time, is something like corporate rain dancing. Yeah? So we'll do the presentation like they want us to do it in the right format, and when they're gone, what do? We go back to normal. It's a friend of you who does that probably. So the thing is that is because we see companies very often see it as a dichotomy, and therefore they say we have a rule and it applies everywhere. And that chance is bigger in these parts of the world than it is in these parts of the world. It's not by coincidence that the Americans have the World Series baseball. I think that's a sign. And where are the World Series baseball played? In Canada and the United States, but we call it the World Series. So it is thinking the world as one, and there are a lot of differences here. If you look at the managerial applications, so in rule-oriented, it's a lot about focusing on the rules, about contracts. In these particularistic countries, it's much more about the relationship. And that's another dimension, I think, in leadership, which is very important. Yeah? The leadership here is much more one of building up the relationship, and so is actually the commercial going on. I mean, if you think about cultures here, I know we have a couple of people from China. China, it's all about relationships, and then afterwards the rules might follow. But if you come with a very rule-oriented attitude into that part of the world, you might get a lot of misunderstandings or a lot of judgment towards each other. Yeah. Now, I know I have to end, so I just want to give you some final tips. I think when you go abroad, which is probably obvious for you, is learn about the business before, but also allow for more time. I think international teams, when they work very well, but it takes much longer to get them working than one national team, yeah, or one functional team. Learn to tolerate uncertainty, because you will find it awkward when you work with people who are different.